the negativity, all the dysfunction.
I love that. Okay, let's go back though with you. If you were to rewind how you used to be, and again, I don't know as a first responder if it's a combination of things, right? Anger, frustration, all these sorts of things, maybe negativity, because maybe you didn't see it like that. I think this is a baby step, but how can they even, how do you know that there is light or believe that there is light or that there is another way or that that's a good thing or how?
How indeed. We were talking before the show about mentors. This
Hmm.
is where the key comes in because we know what we know. We think within our box, and sometimes we expand the box a little, but it's still our box. And so we get stuck in loops and that kind of thing. When I was a younger man, my attitude, my primary attitude was one of negativity, cynicism, and I'm going to protect the weak. So that was the
Mm.
foundations of how I navigated life as a general rule. Now, I'm still a fairly happy person. I went out and I had friends and all that, but my baseline was there. And it began to shift over time to become the predominant way my personality was. And I noticed relationships were suffering. My ability to do my job was less. I was in conflict more, fights a lot more. I wasn't coming from the heart anymore. And you come in with this idea that you're going to save the world and you realize you're a band-aid on a machine gun wound, right? So that
Hmm.
just keeps adding fuel to this fire. I have been very blessed to have had multiple people who fulfilled mentorship roles for me that showed me a different way to be. This was both officers that I worked with, officers from other agencies, and other people just in general who saw life through a different lens and allowed me to see how they perceived life through that lens, which significantly expanded the constraints that I had in my rather tiny box. And it's been an evolution. There is no revolution here. You don't just kick open the door and suddenly flip on the switch and it's rainbows, unicorns, and butterflies. That's a load of bullshit. And anybody who tells you their system lets you do that is trying to sell you something. This is slow, steady trickle
Process.
of work to create more balance, more beauty, more love in your life. And you can do that. And then when you tip, well, that's how you view the world. And once again, I want to emphasize you'll still spot the problems that are out there, the danger, but you're going to just be so much more balanced, centered, grounded, happy.
And what do you think, do you think there was a moment where you're like, I got to change something, or I'm not happy, or you like you heard somebody like a mentor say something and you're like, I like that. Like I want to think like that. Do you think, was there a moment?
I've had a couple of them. One of them was a woman that I was in a relationship with just called out my BS. And it was like a slap across the face because I couldn't argue the truth of it. Like it was a download. Like that's some shizzle right there, right? So
That's for real.
To
Yeah.
this day, it's one of the defining moments of my life that helped that was a door getting kicked open. And she turned the lights on inside the room and shoved my head in there and said, "You better look around in here."
Do you want to
That was,
share? Do you want to share?
well, I mean, that was essentially it. I mean, she said, "God, you're so negative. You're just, always pessimistic. You're always looking at the glass half empty." She just had had enough.
Mm.
And, in a rather explosive way, called me out. But it was exactly what I needed to hear at that moment in time. And it was one of those pivotal moments where I really began to question my own narrative. And then the other defining moment happened in a martial arts seminar, well, a class that I was taking. And I can't remember if I've shared this with you, Nora, or not, so I'll give you the Reader's Digest version. We had a guard from San Quentin prison who
Yes.
came to train with us,
Uh-huh.
big, steroid,
Mhm.
nasty human being. And he challenged my teacher to a fight. They had the fight. And at the end, my teacher never hit him once. And the guy fell on the ground exhausted from his exertions. My teacher went over with love and helped him up. dusted him off and was not angry at him, not in any way. He only projected love. I became very interested in how did you do that? And that turned
Mhm.
me on to meditation. And once I started traveling the meditation path, I was now surrounded by
Mm.
people practicing this as a lifestyle. I noticed how grounded and balanced they were, and all my perceptions of people who meditate, the dirty hippie staring at a candle flame, who's so useless in life he can't even tie his shoes, turned out to be completely wrong. There are a couple of those people in the community, but the vast majority are people doing great work in the world and are using these things to expand into more happiness, more joy, love, service to community. There was no downside. And so those were the kind of the two pivotal moments that helped me to take a pretty big step and get curious. And then once that curiosity got lit, that little flame, no turning that off.
Well, there's no turning it off once you start seeing in your life. If you ask and you say, I want to overcome this, I would like help with this, bring me somebody, like it's on. And then on top of that, when you know you can create, it's like I could tell so many stories you don't even understand, where I am just like, oh my God, it's coming, it's faster and faster. Like within 5 minutes, I'll think of somebody at my side job cafe and they walk in the door. Like within 5 minutes. So I'm like, okay, this is rad. Okay, so I got to think of a way in my series or something, because, and I'm say it right here, give a sample, is that when you were younger or whatever, maybe you did this and you're like, that was a weird coincidence. What was that? Or that was just a coincidence. That was weird. What's going on? I don't know. But you never thought you like how to utilize it. How am I going to benefit from this? You just think it's weird and you can't explain, right? And then I just started messing around with it. So that was part of my journey too. But now, because I know I can create, I'm like, oh, this is happening. This first responder and humanity and everything, this is happening, I hope, in my lifetime, because there's lots of people I feel like too in my age range that like we know how to do it. We know how to get it done. And so I'm like, oh, I don't know if it takes my whole lifetime. Um, okay, so I love that. I want to back up for those people though, and talk about um, your the comment about thinking negative. What did your significant at the time say something specifically? Like, how did she define negative? Because there's real being realistic, like somebody could think like my dad. He says that he's like, I think some people would think I'm like, well, if you're always going there, because I would always say to him when I would ask something, right, can I go to whatever, whatever, and we give me this long drawn out thing about all the facets of it, and I'm all, so is that no? Does that mean no? Okay, no. So what do you think is how you were perceived? Like, how were you negative, in your opinion? Well, she didn't want to be
I'll
with
give
you.
you a great example.
One
I
thing
could have
though, she
won the
didn't.
lottery and I would have found a problem in that.
What did she say she was going to break up with you or wanted to break up
She
with you?
did.
Because okay,
Yep, she did.
okay,
And that's when I took
okay.
a good hard look at it. And I appreciate it. Like I really do, with time and reflection. But as we think about this, there is a healthy cynicism, a healthy negativity, and a first responder has to have that. Because if you don't, my goodness, you're going to get blindsided and you're going to have something bad happen to you. But the problem is, as the years go on and you're exposed to more and more trauma, more and more dysfunction, it's heaping all of that together. And then that's how you see the world. That's where I was. And that default mechanism, while it is an essential survival tool, can also cause us a lot of grief in the end, and so it was that moment of getting called out in such a harsh way and losing a relationship as a result of it that made me step back, and suddenly I had a broader perspective. I was so stuck, Nora, in my own narrative, my own story. And when we keep telling ourselves the same story over and over again, guess what I'm programming my reticular activating system to scan the world for? And then
Mm-hmm.
I see it everywhere Well, there's my validation. See, the rest of you were wrong because you're idiots. You can't see it. I see it. Hey, look, here's this example and this example. And then they tell me about sunshines, rainbows, unicorns, and butterflies. And I'm like, bullshit. It's this, 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 and this because here's the validation. And I have proven it to myself to the point where that personality now creates my personal reality, as Dr. Joe Dispenza says, right? He's exactly right. But the beauty of this, and I think the thing that is probably most essential to anyone listening to the show is I am living proof you can reprogram. I'm living proof that you
Mm-hmm.
don't give up the essential aspects of that that keep you safe, and you can bring in so much more balance. And it's just such a more peaceful place to be. Every aspect of my body and my mind became enhanced, not the opposite, enhanced. And it's just a slow, steady work. I don't obsess over it. And when I hear the little voice come up that is still present, sometimes that guy, if I'm tired and my resilience is low, that guy comes to the forefront again, and I have to have a conversation with him and say, "Thank you. I appreciate you sharing that perspective. Now, please go back to the back of the bus. The master is driving again. Have a
Mm-hmm.
good day. I'll take your input and consider it." And I don't fight myself anymore. In the beginning, when I tried to make these shifts, I thought, man, something's wrong with me. I must be mentally ill. No, once I realized this is actually just an internal program, I could lighten up on myself and just continue doing the work, doing the process of evolving into someone. And I'm still evolving to this day. This is a never ending journey, but I like the journey. It brings me so much joy.
And sometimes it takes a long time, especially for certain lessons. And that's for another show we can get into, like what kind of calls you attract and stuff like that. Right. I think definitely first responders would expect that. And I can see the life connections because you will keep getting right the same calls, right? If you
How
don't.
many times have we said, that guy's a shit magnet?
Uh huh. Uh huh.
That's
Uh
me.
huh. Uh huh.
I just kept attracting the most outrageous stuff you could possibly imagine. I was like, what's going? And here's interesting piece too. As I began to shift,
What
so did
happened?
that experience.
Yeah. What happened? So it went from like what? Like what
It
kind
went
of a
from
call?
fighting 4 or 5 times a week, literally,
Uh huh.
sometimes all death is on the line fights, to I might have fought or struggled with someone once every quarter because I became so
Interesting.
centered, so grounded, so balanced that I could communicate more effectively with people. I could talk them out of crisis. So instead of beating them out of crisis, I talked them out of crisis. And wow, everything shifts. The respect for the officer shifts, the community relations shift. Everything is better and balanced. In the beginning, if you don't have good mentorship, and the department I started with was very kind of cowboy. One of my lieutenants during my orientation said, "In this department, if anyone messes with us, they go to the hospital, then they go to jail." Read me. So that was very old school, and I'm dating myself. And people, oh, that's why we should defund and reform. Well, yeah, right. We want to remove that kind of aspect of service, quote unquote. We need to get that out of the profession. It's not that we don't have the ability to utilize force when we're legally, morally, and ethically justified, but the question becomes, am I creating that? And could I have a shift here that is of even greater service to the person that I'm dealing with, the community at large? These are broad questions that are very important to consider, because I was justified in all that use of force. But the problem was I was also creating the situation that called for that use of force many times. And so when I shifted my attitude, I didn't become unsafe. I became more skilled at de-escalation, which is a very popular word today. We didn't even have it when I started my job. What would that even be considered? So that's the evolutionary aspect of it, Nora. That's the beauty of it, is that you become more oriented to community through the heart, but you are not diminished in your officer's safety. I think that's a key point.
So what do you think, we could totally go on with the positive thinking thing, is that what is